Hello and welcome in or welcome back to my channel. I'm Deb from DG Reads and this is my furry sidekick Kylie, and we are here to kick off a cozy weekend reading vlog. It's the weekend before Valentine's Day. It's Friday night. I came home from work just in the mood to put on my PJs, put Kylie in some PJs, and settle in for a cozy weekend. I do have a couple things going on this weekend. I have a live show for Wheel of Time on Sunday on my channel, so it's not entirely responsibility free, but for the most part, this is the first weekend in a long while where I don't have plans that require me to leave the house or to have people come over to the house or having to put together furniture or having to be social in person. So I'm taking full advantage. And I thought with it being February, with it being nearly Valentine's Day, I thought maybe we could make a theme out of it. So I've got my hearts on my coffee PJs here. Kylie's got some hearts on her PJs, and I've got a bit of a TBR to try to see how many books related to hearts I can get to this weekend. If you've seen my weekend challenge series, it's kind of in that same vein, trying to stick with the prompt and see how much reading I can get done. But in this case, I know the prompt. I set the prompt myself instead of pulling one from a mystery jar. One of the books that was on my TBR for this month that I used kind of to spurn the idea of making this a heart-themed vlog is Labyrinth's Heart. And I'm actually almost done with this one. It's huge. It wasn't going to get read in the space of a weekend with a lot more, and it's the end of a series, so there's not a whole lot I can say about this one. I have about half an hour left, so I can tell you that I really have been enjoying this one. It took me probably 20% to get back into this world because it has been a while since last I read this series, but I'm so thrilled to finally be wrapping up a series, I've enjoyed a lot. This one has some really interesting magic related to tarot cards basically, and how that works and how different people can interpret the cards or maybe impact the cards. So I'm not really going to talk too much about this one in the space of this vlog just because it is the end of a series, but I wanted to point it out since it was an inspiration and it is a book on my TBR that I am definitely finishing this weekend. In terms of books that I do plan to read for this vlog in particular, I do have 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This is the author of Thistlefoot, which I did really enjoy, and it's one that's actually been on at least one other TBR, one other vlog TBR potentially as well. This is a fantasy story collection, and you have a mix of short stories in here, and then toward the end there's also these kind of character descriptions, almost like a encyclopedia of different things. So I'm very intrigued. I've read the first few short stories and so far I've been enjoying it, so I will provide an update once I have read more. For my aardvark book this month, I picked up Cross My Heart by Megan Collins, and this is one that I would like to read before it sits around too long, so definitely plan to get to this one this weekend. We have a woman who was dumped in her wedding dress a year ago. She's a heart transplant recipient, and there's something about this heart transplant that leads to some complicated relationships, I think, so I will find out more. The Trail of Lost Hearts by Tracy Garvis Graves. This is one I was gifted by St. Martin's Press and I've had on my list for quite a while. We're following a young woman who is out geocaching and she winds up getting into some trouble. Someone saves her and they wind up pairing up to continue on their way. And then I also thought this was a perfect time to make sure I get to my nonfiction book from my TBR for this month, and that is The Story of a Heart, Two Families, One Heart, and the Medical Miracle That Saved a Child's Life. This is by Dr. Rachel Clark, and it's looking at the story of a young girl who was involved in a fatal accident, and her parents elected to donate her organs, and that wound up saving the life of a young boy. And I think it's talking about that story, but also kind of the bigger picture of transplants in the history of transplants and stuff like that. This one, I only have a physical copy, so I'm hopeful that it's an easy read. So with that, I will go ahead and get to reading. I am excited to be doing crocheting this weekend, which wound up being just coincidentally to be crocheting a bunch of hearts. So that worked out rather well, and I picked up some treats for me and for Kylie to go along with the theme also. So I will get to reading. My battery's about to die, so better get to it. I'm back with you because I am halfway into the Trail of Lost Hearts, and this one has been a really easy read to just kind of consume. I wound up picking up the audiobook from the library and have been working on it that way while getting some stuff done. We are following Ren, who is a young woman whose entire world has been flipped upside down. She's got a lot of conflicting feelings about things that have happened that we don't initially really know about at the very beginning, but she has found that geocaching, meaning using a GPS to go out and find things in nature, in the world, is something that gets her moving. It gets her motivated to get out of bed. And she's entirely turned herself off to the idea of romance, and she's just kind of looking to live her life on her own, including doing this solo trip in Oregon to go looking for hidden objects. When she's out in the forest on her own, a couple of really brute type of men grab her, they take her phone away from her, and she gets really stuck. She's out in nature, she's on her own, there's not too much she can do against these guys, and then Marshall comes onto the scene, and he quickly gets the sense that something's wrong. She's smart enough to kind of let him in on the fact that something's wrong as well, and he basically winds up saving her. She's a little nervous about trusting another man after this situation, but she winds up going with him. She learns that he is a psychiatrist, I believe, psychologist. He's a psychologist, and he's dealing with some upsets in his life also. And as it turns out, they decide to just kind of pair up on this whole geocaching adventure and go off and do this together without necessarily forming a bond or a relationship. But of course, there's going to be a bond and a relationship that comes from it. I am halfway into this, and I really like the relationship they start developing and the friendship they start developing, and the way she can kind of open up to him more so than she can necessarily to the people in her life about the things that have gone wrong. It goes pretty quickly from strangers who don't have an interest in a relationship to getting a little hot and heavy. I would prefer more of a slow burn, but since it's not the focus of the story, I'm not bothered by it either. I think there's a lot of good discussions in here about grief and what you have permission to grieve, what you should grieve, and I think the concept of therapy and working through issues and stuff like that is being well handled in here as well. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with this one and finishing it up maybe tonight, and then I can move on to another book. I think I'm going to be kind of dipping in and out of my nonfiction and my short stories, so we'll see where I wind up going with all of this. It's now Saturday morning. I'm sitting here because I am working on doing some crocheting. I am making a hearts and flowers blanket as part of a crochet along. I'm not sure if that's going to show up on screen or not. I can always put a picture up. This is a crochet along that's done by Serdar. Not sure even how it's pronounced. This is one I was originally inspired by Becca at Becca and the Books. She did their Christmas crochet along, and I was really intrigued by that but didn't get in on it on time. So when they announced their spring one, I decided to hop on board. And a lot of people from Eleanor Reed's Patreon all decided to either do this one or one of their past crochet along projects, or just crochet projects in general. And the idea being that we're all working on them at the same time and keeping each other accountable for it. The pattern worked in a way where it's over 6 weeks, and they release the pattern once a week, and you kind of doing different parts of the blanket and attaching them together, and eventually you get a completed blanket. This particular first week wound up being perfect because the idea of this one is to make hearts. I have to do 16 of these little heart granny squares, which is my first time doing granny squares. So at the moment I'm doing a bunch of middle portions of this while I'm seated at the table here, because this is the part that requires changing colors and focusing a little bit better on the pattern. And then the outer layers are just kind of mindless crochet where you don't have any color changes and it follows a very set pattern. So those I can sit on the couch with puppy in lap and go ahead and do that then. So I'm kind of working on that this weekend, which worked quite well with my theme for the weekend. I've of course got my heart mug to help me be caffeinated along the way, and I do have a couple of reading updates for you. I am currently 132 pages into the story of a heart, which puts me just past the halfway point. And this one is definitely heartbreaking, definitely interesting. We are following the story of two young children. Kira, her mother, and her brother were involved in a traffic accident that leaves Kira brain dead. She looks perfectly fine from the outside, but without mechanical intervention to help her breathe, she has absolutely no life within her anymore. And we're following her story, but also the story of the doctors around her, the nurses, the family, and everything else. The family is very big-hearted. You can tell that from the story that's being told, and it's actually her 11-year-old sister who first brings up the concept of donating organs and the fact that Kira would want to do that. And her father, who is there with her, absolutely agrees this is something Kira would want and need to do. On the flip side of it, we have Max, who is a young boy whose heart is severely damaged. He is at risk at any moment, basically, of going into cardiac arrest, and they will not be able to bring back. His heart is extremely enlarged, and this is extremely dangerous. And we know from the beginning, from the synopsis of this particular book, that he is going to get Kira's heart. So this is following the whole process from the moment of each of these children entering a hospital for the first time and how they got there. And at the point where I'm at now, we're at the matching part, and it's all very interesting. I would say there are a few tangents here and there that don't feel necessary to me to the actual story of it all, and there are moments where it gets a little technical and going over my head just a tad, but I think in general this doctor who's writing this book is giving a really good layman's term account of this. And this is set in the UK, so it's not exactly the same as our system here in the US, but there's definitely a lot of overlaps. She talks about the overlaps between systems as well, so I'm finding this really interesting. I finished up A Trail of Lost Hearts last night, and this one I generally liked. I talked about in the first clip, I think, that the relationship went from zero to hot and heavy quickly, but it wasn't the focus of the story, and therefore I was fine with it. Just past that halfway point, it became the focus of the story for quite a bit of time. And I mean, these characters only had a week together, which is a super high-speed relationship to the point of lots of sex and feelings and stuff in the space of this short period of time. So that I didn't love as much. There was also something that came up that isn't my favorite thing in books later on. I don't think it's in the synopsis. No, it's not. So I don't want to say, but there is a particular trope, kind of, but not really going on in here that's not my favorite. But I think the discussions on grief, the discussions on opening up and being open to new relationships, new experiences were all really good. Overall, this one's getting on the lower end of a 4-star for me. And then I also finished up 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart. Wow, why am my brain struggling to say that title? But I did finish this one up. I didn't love the portion that was kind of these little encyclopedia entries of different creatures. Some of them were good. I enjoyed the humor in some of them, but it felt a little too much too quickly together, and that was the point of the story, was 50 Beasts to break your heart. That was kind of the center of this book, was this story with all these different beasts involved and their descriptions and information about them. But it did go back into short stories back at the end as well. And in general, I really enjoyed these. I like that they were very weird. We've got a set of stairs that are a roadside tourist attraction that people come to, and someone might fall in love with a particular stair. There's not really a beginning or an end to these stairs. Then we have kind of these two girls with their romantic relationship as they're working at this tourist Lust Attraction. So that one was interesting. One that stuck with me was called Drowning Lessons, and it was a young man and his sister has this propensity to constantly find herself drowning. And it's not that she can't swim and she's entering water. It's things like she gets hit in the head and she falls into a drink and starts drowning there. She passes out inexplicably next to a puddle and winds up drowning there. So he's constantly having to save her, and it just gets more bizarre from there. So overall, I really enjoyed the story collection. I'm giving it 4 stars. It was a solid collection to pick up, and I'm glad that I finally got to it and that this theme convinced me to add it to my reading list for the weekend. And last but not least, I did also finish up Labyrinth's Heart. I know I was nearly done when I last updated you, so I don't really have any additional thoughts, but I'm very happy to have wrapped up a series, and I gave this one in the end 4 stars. I think if I had read it a little bit sooner after I did the last book, I think it maybe could have been a slightly higher score from me. I think it just took me a little too long to settle back into this book. Thank you, Kylie. I did want you to drink your water right at this particular moment. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next book, which is the last one I actually have definitively planned, I think, at the moment, and that is Cross My Heart by Megan Collins. This one I actually have the audio from Simon Audio, so I'm going to pick that up while apparently Kylie does not like the place I put her food. She's moving it back to where the bowl used to be very loudly. Thank you, puppy. So, like I was trying to say, just gonna ignore her for the moment. I am going to go ahead and put this on as an audiobook while I continue on crocheting my hearts, and I'll let you know what I'm thinking of this once I get going. It looks like I haven't moved since the last time I talked to you. That's because I mostly haven't, but I did finish my 2 pink hearts, and I've moved on to the last 2 colors that I need to do the center of the hearts in, so I'm making good progress. And while I've been at it, I am now 40% of the way into Cross My Heart. So the main character in this one is Rosie, and she is a little bit obsessive, more than a little bit really, and she has this obsession over the man whose wife gave her her heart. She was dumped by her fiance a year ago, and that was really messy, and she's got a lot of scars from that situation. And then on top of that, she had something wrong with her heart that caused her heart to be enlarged, and she needed a transplant. By happenstance, she happens to get the heart of a woman who died. Her husband was a famous author and someone that Rosie becomes obsessed with. She and this man connect through a social media kind of platform that connects the recipients with family of donors, and it's all anonymous, but through that she begins to gather information about him. They form this friendship, talking about this woman who connects them, but then going beyond that, and she gets information about him from that and from his public image, since she does know who he is, even though she's not supposed to, and manages, of course, to track him down. She knows where he lives, she knows where he drinks coffee, all of these types of things. So she's a little obsessed, like I've said. The other thing that comes up is that there is a theory going around that he actually killed his wife, this woman whose heart she has. And she's quick to defend him, but there's more and more kind of mounting evidence that their relationship wasn't quite as glamorous as she has in mind that it was. So it's very intriguing. We are following this email conversation between the 2 of them on this Donor Connect website, and we're also getting a narrative of what's happening in the present day. And at this point, he doesn't know about her and her obsession with him and her knowing who he is in real life, but I'm intrigued to see how this is going to wind up developing. His conversations with her definitely paint him in a much more positive light, and I think even with her, or with both of them really, we're getting the sense that neither one of them is necessarily the most reliable of narrators per se. So I'm intrigued intrigued to see where this goes. So I'm gonna keep crocheting. I think it's about time to take a break, get Kylie a treat, get myself a treat. I'll show you what I got for Kylie. She's got this heart cookie that I picked up at Petco yesterday for her, and I think it's a little bit large for her, but I will give her a piece of that in a little bit and maybe get myself a sweet treat after I make some lunch. So I'll be back once I have some more thoughts for you. I finished my final heart center, so it's time for a heart treat. Would you like a cookie? Yeah. I have just finished up the live show for Wheel of Time, which was a lot of fun, and even though my internet did kick me out of my own live show for a little bit because apparently it felt the need to crash today, but I'm back with final thoughts on a few things, wrap up this particular vlog. I've finished up a total of 8 of my little granny square hearts. I have 8 more to finish up. I've done the centerpiece of each of them, but I need to do kind of the outer rows and finish that up and then connect them and then do a stripe on the top and the bottom of each row. And the new week of patterns comes out on Wednesday. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up because I've been dedicating a lot of time to doing the crocheting, and this is the only weekend where I really didn't have plans where I need to leave the house. So we'll see. Next weekend is a long weekend, but I'm also getting a couple vaccines, so I don't necessarily anticipate being the most energetic for the weekend. We'll see. I'm gonna keep going with this. I will probably check in with you at some point, provide some updates, maybe some other vlogs. I don't know. If not, definitely my Instagram stories. In terms of final thoughts, I have Cross My Heart by Megan Collins finished at this point, and I really wound up enjoying this. It is twisty and turny in a way that I did not predict everything the author threw at us. In part, I think the author definitely went out of her way to pull the wool over our eyes in places, but I appreciated that. I appreciated the fact that I did get the sense that things weren't necessarily going the way I thought they were going, but I didn't figure out everything along the way. This had me fully hooked. I really just kind of binged it in the 2 sittings I spent reading it, and overall this was a really good time. Glad I picked it up. I'm glad it's a bookbox book that didn't sit on my shelf for a long time before I read it. So I'm giving this one a very, very strong 4-star. It didn't quite hook me in enough to be a 5-star read, but it was a very good time. So with that finished, I have now finished my hearts reading for the weekend, and my hearts crocheting will continue on, but I had a very good time with the stack of books. There weren't any that I didn't enjoy, which is always a nice benefit. I'm realizing there was a color scheme until I got to Cross Your Heart, but with these I did also finish up Labyrinth's Heart, and that was also a win. So this was a good time. I got to spend some time with Kylie this weekend and just reading and crocheting and relaxing in my PJs for the most part, minus the time spent on one particular live show, but overall it was fun. So with that and one more battery change, I have finished up my hearts weekend. I have one more treat for Kylie. I picked her up a little Kong toy. She really likes the fling it around type of toys, and this one had hearts on the inside, so I of course had to pick this one up. And she's been a very good sport during the live show, not making too much noise or causing too much chaos, so she's going to get this as soon as I wrap up this vlog. Let me know in the comments below, have you read any of these books? Do you have any exciting plans for Valentine's Day weekend? When this is going live? What makes for a cozy weekend in your mind? I'd love to hear all the things down below. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me a dog emoji, because Kylie is going to be having a lot of fun with her new toy, and she's currently staring at me and hearing me talk about her and her toy. So that seems appropriate. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in more Kylie content, more of my reading vlogs, and more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.